All right, let's jump right in. We're tackling the changing demographics of Europe today, and we've got a really interesting mix of footage and interviews all about Muslim immigration
Oh, yeah.
and its effects on European culture.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
It's a complex issue for sure. So let's see what all these different perspectives reveal, and what it might mean for the future.
You hit the nail on the head when you say complex.
Yeah.
The thing about this topic is that it's not just about numbers changing.
Right.
It's really about the whole idea of identity,
Sure, what you mean.
What happens when a society's sense of itself is challenged in such a fundamental way?
It's like a shakeup.
Yeah, and that's what makes this deep dive so powerful, I think.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And the sources we have,
Mm-hmm.
they don't shy away from that at all.
No, yeah.
Right off the bat, we see this reality. The Muslim population is growing all across Europe, especially in places like London and Birmingham, where
Right.
white families are actually becoming the minority.
That's right.
I mean, think about it. Mohammed is now the top baby boy name in London.
It's pretty amazing.
It's a huge cultural shift, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So what do those numbers actually tell us?
Well,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that Europe has always been this kind of melting pot
Right.
with waves of migration throughout history.
It's always a changing.
But what we're seeing now
Yeah.
is a scale and a pace that's really unprecedented, I think.
I see.
There's a French writer in some of this material we're looking at, and he called it
Okay.
the biggest thing to happen to France since the 15th century.
Wow. The 15th century.
Yeah, and this is creating some really, really strong reactions.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like all these different forces colliding,
Exactly.
like a pressure cooker almost.
It is.
And our sources show that whole spectrum of reactions, everything from excitement to anxiety to just like outright fear.
It's all there.
Some Muslims actually see this as a chance to reshape European society.
Yeah.
Even talking about implementing Sharia law.
Yeah, that's right. The idea of Sharia law, that's a key point of tension.
Huge.
It's a legal system based on Islamic teachings.
Okay.
And its interpretation and how it's actually implemented varies quite a bit.
Yeah.
Some people advocate for it being fully adopted,
Right.
while others see it as completely incompatible with secular European values.
Interesting.
This whole debate really goes to the core
Yeah.
of the anxieties around this cultural change.
It really does.
Mhm.
And then you have non-Muslims who are worried about
Sure.
their own cultures and values being eroded.
Yeah.
Anxieties about rising crime and even violence.
Definitely.
It feels like people are just kind of grasping for some sort of certainty in the face of such rapid change.
Oh, absolutely. That's
Inani.
a natural human reaction, right?
It is.
And that's why it's so important to kind of step back and analyze things with a critical eye.
Be objective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How much of this fear is really based on legitimate concerns and how much is fueled by prejudice or just misinformation?
Mm-hmm. Good point.
That's a key question for us to keep in mind
Absolutely.
as we go through all of this.
And we can't ignore those more extreme reactions.
No, absolutely not.
Pop up in the footage, right?
Yeah,
There's some serious fear-mongering and
it's out.
anti-Muslim sentiment out there, yeah.
It is.
Some people even calling for violence
Yeah,
or suppressing Muslim communities entirely.
right. And these
Yeah.
extreme voices, while concerning, they often point to
Yeah.
deeper anxieties that are present in society.
Interesting.
One interesting example that I noticed is
Okay.
the inclusion of this video game, The Division,
Oh, yeah.
and it's got the simulator called Collapse.
Okay.
And basically, players can spread a virus
Oh.
and watch society fall apart. It's fiction, of course,
Sure.
but it might be reflecting those anxieties about societal breakdown that we're talking about.
It's like tapping into that fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a primal fear of the unknown
Exactly.
and losing control.
Yeah. And it's interesting how that seems to be a pattern throughout history, right?
Oh, definitely.
When societies face uncertain times.
Yeah, anytime there's uncertainty or big changes,
Scapegoating comes up.
yeah, scapegoating and prejudice, they kind of rear their ugly heads.
Yeah.
It's really important to recognize those patterns
For sure.
so that we don't just keep repeating the mistakes of the past.
Right. So knowing all this,
Yeah.
where do we go from here?
We-
What are we looking for as we dive deeper into these sources?
Good question.
Where do we even begin to sort of untangle all this?
I think the key is to look for those moments of nuance,
Okay.
those glimpses of understanding
Yeah.
that might cut through all the noise.
Like, are people actually talking to each other?
Exactly.
Right. Trying to bridge these divides.
Are there people out there advocating for coexistence,
Right.
trying to understand each other?
Yeah,
Those are the glimmers of hope that we need to hold on to.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. You know, as we go through these sources, one thing that really struck me is how they don't just present like these abstract arguments.
Right. They give us concrete examples.
They offer, yeah, really vivid, concrete examples.
Yeah.
You know, it makes the issue come alive.
It's one thing to talk about, like, cultural clashes in theory,
Right.
but then you see that footage of the demonstration
Uh-huh.
outside the Danish embassy in London
Yeah.
with a protester dressed as a suicide bomber.
Oh, wow.
It's powerful.
That's a powerful image.
It really is.
And it definitely plays into those fears that we were talking about.
Yeah, it makes it real.
It makes those potential consequences feel much more immediate.
Yeah, visceral.
Yeah, visceral.
And then on the other side of the coin,
Mm-hmm.
you have individuals like Imran in Belgium.
Right. Who openly states his desire to replace Belgian law with Sharia law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, not an abstract concept.
No, it's a real person
It's a real guy.
articulating a very specific
Right.
and to many concerning vision of the future.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Then we see those accounts of anti-Muslim violence and hate speech.
Right.
That footage of the Revolutionary Front in Sweden vandalizing the home of a suspected fascist.
Huh.
Brutal.
It's shockingly brutal.
Both sides have their extremists.
They do.
Right?
They do, and they grab the headlines.
They do, that's right.
And that's where the need for critical analysis really comes in.
Yeah, put on your thinking caps.
Yeah, because, you know,
Yeah,
those extremists don't necessarily represent the majority,
of course not.
but their actions can create this climate of fear and distrust
Right.
that affects everyone.
Everyone gets caught up in it.
So we need to be careful not to oversimplify the situation
Right.
or fall into that trap of us versus them thinking.
Us versus them.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that statistic from Oslo about those assault rapes,
Oh, yeah?
where it claims that 100% were committed by non-Western immigrant males.
Right. That's a shock.
It's a shocking number.
It's shocking, yeah.
But without more context,
Yeah.
it's dangerous to draw conclusions from it.
Right. That's a perfect example of
Yeah.
how statistics can be misleading.
Right.
If they're presented without nuance.
You need the whole story.
We need to ask, who collected this data? What was the methodology?
Right.
Are there other social and economic factors at play?
Important questions.
It's not about dismissing the issue, but about really understanding it in its full complexity.
Right. So it's like we need a critical thinking toolkit
Yeah,
to navigate this landscape.
That's a great way to put it.
One thing that struck me
Mhm.
was how the material portrays Europe's struggle to reconcile its identity
Yeah.
with this huge wave of immigration.
It's a huge question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like this massive social experiment with no guaranteed outcome.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's this quote that I found so thought-provoking.
Okay, what is it?
Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
Wow.
That's-
Heavy stuff.
That's a powerful statement.
Right.
It suggests that multiculturalism isn't just an ideal,
Right.
it's an existential necessity for Europe's survival.
Oh.
But it also acknowledges the challenges and potential for conflict along the way.
It's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
It is. It's a delicate balance.
And we see those challenges play out on a very human level, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's not forget the humanitarian crisis that's happening amidst all of this.
Right.
The footage from the refugee camps,
It's hard to watch.
the desperation in people's voices.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and displacement.
Yeah. We're talking about families, children, individuals
Real people.
risking everything for a chance at a better life. It's easy to get caught up in those abstract debates about demographics and culture.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
this is about real people with real lives and real struggles.
Exactly. We
Right.
need to balance those big picture discussions
For sure.
with a recognition of the very human stories at the heart of this issue.
Human stories.
Stories of hope, resilience, but also of fear and loss.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that empathy and compassion have to be central to any conversation
Absolutely.
about immigration and integration.
They have to be.
And not just empathy for those arriving,
Right.
but also for those who already call Europe home
Of course.
and are struggling to adapt to these really rapid changes.
It's about recognizing that change can be unsettling
Yeah.
and that people have legitimate concerns
Legitimate concern.
about their communities and their way of life.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to address those concerns constructively
Right.
and not resort to that fear-mongering or scapegoating.
No, we've got to do better than that. So it sounds like we're talking about a real balancing act here.
It is. It is.
How do we create societies that are both diverse and cohesive?
That's the question, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Where different cultures can live side by side without one overwhelming the other.
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, yeah.
And the material doesn't shy away from showcasing those clashes of values.
No, it doesn't.
We see examples of cultural practices like wearing the burqa,
Yeah.
being met with hostility, and
Yeah.
even attempts at legal bans.
That's right.
Mhm.
You have those who see certain practices as just fundamentally incompatible with European values,
Yeah,
while others defend them as expressions of religious freedom
right.
and cultural identity.
That's a tough one.
A global debate, too, right?
It is. It is. It's not just in Europe.
This struggle to define those boundaries between individual rights and cultural norms,
It's everywhere.
it's a big question.
It is a big question, and there are no easy answers.
Yeah, but I guess the important thing is that we at least engage in these conversations.
We have to.
Right.
We have to engage openly and honestly,
Be willing to listen.
with a willingness to listen and learn from each other.
Yeah, step outside of our own little echo chambers.
That's right.
And truly try to hear what other people are saying.
And try to understand their concerns and aspirations,
Mm.
even if they're different from us.
Yeah, because maybe that's where we find some hope amidst all of this,
I like that.
right?
Yeah, it's about recognizing that diversity,
Yeah,
while sometimes messy and challenging,
can be.
can also be a source of strength and richness.
Exactly. See the potential for growth
Yeah,
rather than just a threat.
right.
You know, going through all this, one thing that really stands out is how fear and anxiety are being exploited
Oh, yeah.
on both sides of this whole issue.
Yeah, it's like a feedback loop, isn't it?
It is.
We see those examples of anti-Muslim rhetoric and then extremist Islamic views,
Right.
and they just seem to feed off of each other.
They do. They amplify those fears.
Yeah.
It's like one side points to acts of terrorism or those calls for Sharia law as proof of this threat to European culture.
Right.
And then the other side uses that anti-Muslim sentiment and
Yeah.
discrimination to fuel resentment and radicalization.
Exactly. It's a
Vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle, a classic example
Yeah.
of how fear can be manipulated for political or ideological gain. And the sources we've looked at, they definitely don't shy away from showing us how that plays out.
No, they go.
We see those far-right groups
Yeah.
using really inflammatory language and imagery
Yeah, trying to demonize Muslims.
to demonize Muslims, yeah, painting them as this existential threat to European civilization.
It's scary stuff.
It is.
And then on the other side,
Yeah.
you have those extremist Islamic preachers calling for the overthrow of Western governments and the establishment of Islamic states.
Yeah, like they're both pushing these apocalyptic narratives.
Like the end of the world is coming.
Yeah, this clash of civilizations destined to end in violence and chaos.
Right. And that's the danger, isn't it?
That's the danger when fear and anger take over.
Mm-hmm.
Rational discourse just goes out the window.
Nobody's listening anymore.
Nobody's listening, and the potential for violence
Skyrocket.
increases exponentially.
Right.
It becomes so much harder to find any kind of common ground or build those bridges.
Yeah, it's really sad.
It is.
This makes me think about leadership.
Okay.
What role do leaders play in all of this?
It's a huge role.
Right. Because they can either calm the waters or fan the flames.
They can. They set the tone
Yeah, exactly.
for how these issues are discussed and debated.
Words have power.
They do.
And when leaders use that power irresponsibly,
Mm-hmm.
it can have a ripple effect across society,
It
right?
does.
Emboldening those extremists
Yeah.
and silencing those moderate voices
Mhm.
who are actually calling for dialogue and understanding.
Yeah, that's right.
We see that in the sources, too.
We do.
Those politicians using anti-immigrant rhetoric
To appeal to certain voters.
to appeal to voters, yeah.
Yes.
And those religious leaders who are preaching intolerance toward other faiths.
Yeah, those voices make it so difficult to have any kind of nuanced conversation about these complex issues.
So where does this all leave us? Are we headed for this clash of civilizations?
It's a big question.
Is there any hope for a more peaceful and harmonious future for Europe?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball,
Of course not.
and I don't think anyone can predict the future with any certainty.
It's impossible.
But what I do know is that the choices that we make
Okay.
both individually and collectively,
Hmm.
will determine what that future looks like.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is, but it's also empowering, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We have the power to shape the narrative,
Right.
to challenge those simplistic us versus them frameworks
Yeah.
that are so often used to divide us.
Right.
The reality is much more complex and nuanced than that.
Nuance has been our guiding principle this whole time.
It has.
It's not about taking sides.
No,
It's about understanding the complexities,
it is.
recognizing the fears and aspirations on both sides,
And seeking common ground.
seeking common ground. That's right.
I think that's the most important message we can leave our listener with.
Yeah.
Engage with these issues.
Yeah.
Educate yourself.
Stay informed.
Listen to different perspectives.
Yeah.
And be willing to challenge your own assumptions.
It's all about growth.
It is.
The future isn't predetermined.
Right.
It's something we create together,
We do.
one conversation, one interaction at a time.
One act of understanding at a time.
Right.
Yeah, and if we can approach these challenges with empathy, curiosity, a willingness to listen,
Mm.
I think we can create a future
Yeah.
where diversity is seen not as a threat, but as a source of strength
I love that.
and enrichment for society.
Well, that's a hopeful note to end on.
It is.
This has been a deep dive, literally and figuratively, but hopefully it's left you feeling informed, engaged,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even a little bit inspired.
Inspired to keep learning, keep questioning,
Yeah.
and keep striving for a future where we can all live together
Peacefully,
peacefully and productively.
despite our differences.
Despite our differences.
Well said.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.
Absolutely.